Notch versus dynamic island, USB-C versus lightning, 2 cameras versus 3, titanium versus aluminum, 120 versus 60 Hz, action button versus mute switch. Some of these are more important than others, and there are a couple reasons why I wouldn't want to go back to my non-Pro iPhone after using the 16 Pro. Lots of YouTubers compare the 16 Pro to the 15 Pro, but that's not really realistic since most 15 Pro owners aren't looking to upgrade to a very similar phone. Instead, the people who are actually upgrading to the 16 series are people with phones that are 2, 3, maybe 4 years old, like people with iPhone 12s, 13s, and 14s. I recently upgraded from the 13 to the 16 Pro. I've had the 13 for around a year and a half, and the 16 Pro for a little over a month now, and we're gonna compare the two phones and determine whether or not the upgrade was worth it for me, and whether or not it might be worth it for you. Let's get started. Both phones have a glass front and back, but the iPhone 16 Pro has a frosted glass back while the iPhone 13's back is glossy, which gets fingerprints and scratches way easier, which is why all of Apple's iPhones now have this frosted matte glass back, which feels so nice. The 13 has an aluminum side rail while the 16 Pro has a titanium side rail. I personally prefer the titanium side rail just because I find it less slippery than the aluminum of the iPhone 13. However, I don't think the feel of the phone matters too much since most people keep their phone in a case anyways. The iPhone 16 Pro weighs 199 grams or 7.03 ounces, while the iPhone 13 weighs 174 grams or 6.14 ounces, which is a decent difference, but I haven't found the extra weight of the 16 Pro to be too much of a hassle. The iPhone 16 Pro has the action button while the iPhone 13 has the silent switch. I thought I'd miss the silent switch more since it's a convenient way to make your phone shut up without actually having to take it out of your pocket, right? But honestly, most people I know just keep their phone on silent the vast majority of the time. The action button is a lot more customizable, and I set mine up to open this action menu, which does 7 different things. So yeah, action button is a pretty solid upgrade, and you can always just map the action button to do silent mode again, just silent mode, like the silent switch used to do. The iPhone 16 Pro also has camera control, which we'll get to in a bit. Overall, both phones have really solid build quality. Like, I don't think the iPhone 13 feels cheap or anything, but the 16 Pro is a level up in terms of build quality and feels like a really premium piece of equipment that's got a sort of elegance and class to it, especially in this gorgeous natural titanium color. These phones have different ports. The iPhone 13 has Lightning and the iPhone 16 Pro has USB-C. I personally like USB-C a lot more because of its convenience, and most people will agree with me on that. It's 2025 and everything else is USB-C. My Mac, my iPad, my Nintendo Switch, everything charges with USB-C. Having a USB-C port also makes it a lot easier to connect accessories such as an external SSD, which makes transferring data from the iPhone to another device a bit less of a hassle. And the 16 Pro also has some advanced camera features that take advantage of this, as I'll talk about later. But yeah, USB-C is so much better than Lightning, and the iPhone 16 Pro seems to charge faster than the iPhone 13 as well. The only way I see USB-C being a downside is if you have a lot of Lightning cables and accessories, or if your other devices like your iPad still use Lightning as well, but eventually in the long run, everything is going to use USB-C. Both phones do have MagSafe, although I'm pretty sure the iPhone 16 Pro has faster charging through MagSafe. As for the speakers, the iPhone 16 Pro speakers are noticeably better than the iPhone 13's. I feel like they're louder and fuller, if that makes sense. But the iPhone 13 speakers are no slouch either. Here's a sound comparison. So yeah, the speakers are still solid on both, but the iPhone 16 Pro is much improved in terms of charging, since that Lightning port on the iPhone 13 is ancient at this point. Another thing on the iPhone 13 that hasn't aged well is 60 Hz refresh rate on the screen. This is probably the one thing that, once I've gotten to the iPhone 16 Pro, makes it very difficult to switch back to any non-Pro iPhone. The iPhone 16 Pro has a 120 Hz refresh rate, so the screen feels twice as smooth compared to the iPhone 13. Even after doing a complete reset, the iPhone 13 still feels stuttery and laggy compared to the iPhone 16 Pro when just swiping and browsing around on the phone because of that 60 Hz refresh rate. And it's honestly kind of wild that Apple's latest standard iPhone 16 is still equipped with the same 60 Hz refresh rate. I will say that before I got the 16 Pro though, I had no problem using the iPhone 13 screen. This was definitely good to use, and I think it's only after upgrading do I realize how much smoother 120Hz is. Personally, I think this is one of the biggest upgrades you get from upgrading from any regular iPhone to even like an iPhone 13 Pro or later, because that's when they started doing 120Hz. It just makes the phone feel so much nicer and more fluid. Now that's refresh rate, but in terms of actual usage, both screens are great. The iPhone 13 has a 6.1 inch screen, while the 16 Pro is a bit larger at 6.3 inches, but the 16 Pro doesn't get that much bigger compared to the 13 because the bezels on the 16 Pro shrunk a bit. Is the extra screen size noticeable? Not really, but the thin bezels are nice. The 16 Pro looks really modern and futuristic. Putting it next to the 13, you can see there's a pretty big difference in terms of bezel size. However, the larger bezel on the iPhone 13 never really bothered me. Most people put a case on their phone anyways, so bezel size is largely irrelevant. The resolution is pretty similar going from the 13 to the 16 Pro. You are getting a slightly higher number of pixels on the 16 Pro because of that larger screen. However, the sharpness remains unchanged, since the density of pixels for both phones sits at 460 ppi. From normal viewing distance, you can't see the individual pixels. You're getting really nice OLED screens with both devices, which means vibrant blacks. Here's a hack if you have an OLED screen. Using a black wallpaper and dark mode is actually a bit better for your battery, since the black on your phone screen are just pixels that have been turned off, saving a bit of battery life. The iPhone 16 Pro's screen can go brighter than the iPhone 13 though, and when you're outdoors on a sunny day, it can go up to 2000 nits. And it can also get dimmer, down to 1 nit in case you're using your phone in bed at night or something. Both phones also have Apple's Ceramic Shield, which is supposed to be good at protecting your phone from cracks and scratches, but the shield on the 16 Pro is supposed to be latest generation, so take that as you will. Last but definitely not least, Dynamic Island versus the notch. I'm kind of obsessed with Dynamic Island. I love how clever it is, taking a limitation of the hardware and making it into a feature. Basically, the iPhone 13 has a notch, which is a little cutout that houses the front camera and some of the sensors for the Face ID system. However, the iPhone 16 Pro takes that cutout and makes it pill-shaped, and then built software around it to make it an interactive part of the operating system. You can actually see that there's two cutouts on the Dynamic Island if you shine a bright light on it, one for the Face ID stuff and one from the front camera, but the pixels in between them are turned off, so it looks like one giant pill. But yeah, you can use Dynamic Island to control your music, show directions on Apple and Google Maps, track your Uber, see your timers, and do a lot more as well. Basically, anything that can show up as a live activity will probably show up in the Dynamic Island as well. It also consolidates all of the system alerts like low battery warnings, AirPod connections, airdrops, all that stuff into one little unified interface, which is really nice. Unfortunately, if you don't like Dynamic Island for some reason, you can't turn it off permanently, but if you don't want it to show for whatever reason, you can hide it temporarily by swiping on it. As for watching content and playing games, the Dynamic Island does stick out quite a bit more than the notch, which can get kind of annoying, but I haven't found it to be that much of a noticeable annoyance. There wasn't really anything wrong with just having a notch on the iPhone 13, other than looking a bit outdated, but I do like the Dynamic Island quite a bit more, and it's just kind of cool and awesome. Last but not least, the iPhone 16 Pro has the always on display, which is kind of cool, but I actually recently turned it off since I don't find it useful enough to justify the extra battery drain. Overall, the screen on both of these devices are great, but the 120Hz on the iPhone 16 Pro and the cleverness of the Dynamic Island are two compelling reasons to upgrade. The brighter screen is also quite nice and really quite noticeable when you're outside on a sunny day. It makes looking at your screen in bright weather much easier. As for performance and software, both phones run iOS 18 quite smoothly, and both can occasionally have bugs as well. However, the iPhone 16 Pro has double the RAM at 8 gigs compared to the iPhone 13's 4 gigs of RAM. Essentially, more RAM is better and lets you have more apps open on your iPhone at once without them closing in the background. My iPhone 13 would sometimes get stuttery and hot if I was listening to music and using Google Maps at the same time, and if I opened the camera app, oftentimes it would just close every other app that I had open on my iPhone, and I'd have to reopen them. The iPhone 16 Pro doesn't have this issue most of the time, and I can often open apps and pick up right where I left off without the app having to reopen itself. Having the A18 Pro, which is a 3-generation leap compared to the A15 and the iPhone 13, also helps the iPhone 16 Pro. The iPhone 16 Pro can handle pretty much anything I throw at it, including shooting video and using the LiDAR scanner to scan stuff. The iPhone 13 is by no means slow either, but the iPhone 16 Pro just has an extra bit of snappiness to it. Finally, the iPhone 16 Pro also manages heat better, I feel, since I find it getting warm less often. And it almost never gets outright hot. It'll only get hot when I'm doing intensive tasks like multitasking while FaceTime calling for a long time, whereas the iPhone 13 gets warm pretty frequently and occasionally hot. However, this also has to do with how I treated the phones. My iPhone 13 was dangerously close to getting full storage quite often, and that probably also contributed to the phone getting hotter and laggier. The kind of case you use can also impact heat management. As for software longevity, both phones run iOS 18, but the 16 Pro is obviously getting more support than the iPhone 13 since it's a lot newer. Apple typically gives their phones 5 to 6 years of software updates, so the iPhone 13 still has 2 or 3 years of software support left, probably lasting until iOS 20 or even iOS 21. The iPhone 16 Pro is brand new, so it's going to have at least another 5 years of software updates, and it'll last till iOS 23 or iOS 24, probably losing support around 2030, so if you buy this guy, you'll have access to the latest iPhone software for about half a decade, which is pretty good. Also, the iPhone 16 Pro has Apple Intelligence, but we all know how well that's going. So yes, the iPhone 16 Pro will be more equipped for AI when it does eventually come out. I mean, the 13 doesn't even get Apple Intelligence, but I wouldn't buy the iPhone 16 Pro just for Apple Intelligence because it's quite unfinished at the moment. Overall, the iPhone 13 still offers good performance, especially considering its age, but the iPhone 16 Pro is a pretty noticeable upgrade in terms of keeping apps open in the background for longer and also just generally providing a snappier experience. And the 120Hz the iPhone 16 Pro has also helps it feel smoother to use. The iPhone 16 Pro's battery offers a pretty big upgrade from the iPhone 13's battery on paper, and in the real world, the difference is going to be even bigger since most iPhone 13s out in the world have degraded battery health, and therefore even less battery life. I do find that the iPhone 16 Pro's battery life is better than the iPhone 13's, but it's not the stellar jump like I thought it would be. I'm getting like maybe 5 hours of screen on time for every full charge and sometimes less, which isn't that good. It might just be iOS 18 acting weird though. Some people have gotten really good battery experiences with the iPhone 16 Pro, but generally if you want really good battery life, go for the Plus model or the Pro Max model. So it's a bit of an improvement, but not the significant jump I was hoping for. Alright, cameras. First off, let me just say how big the cameras on the iPhone 16 Pro are. Like, the camera square is huge, and the camera lens just stick out so much as well. The phone rocks a lot more, both with and without a case. However, I don't really care about the increased size or the fact that it rocks, since I'm holding my phone most of the time anyways, not using it on a table, but just know that it is bigger, and it will rock on a table if you choose to use it on a table. The lenses are larger as well, which lets in more light and is ultimately better for camera performance. Now, the photos you get out of the box from the default camera app look pretty similar if lighting is good on both phones, but the iPhone 16 Pro offers more flexibility and potential than the iPhone 13, I think. The 16 Pro has a higher resolution ultra-wide at 48 megapixels compared to the 12 megapixel sensor on the iPhone 13, and it also has the 12 megapixel 5x telephoto lens that the 13 does not have. So on the 13 in photo mode, you can go up to 5x in terms of zoom, while on the 16 Pro you can go up to 25x, which is pretty awesome, and I've actually taken a couple nice moon photos with the iPhone 16 Pro, as you can see here. Low light performance on the iPhone 16 Pro is also noticeably improved in both the main and ultra-wide sensors. You also get next generation photographic styles on the iPhone 16 Pro. The 13 has photographic styles as well, but they're baked into the phone and you can't change them after you've taken the photo. The iPhone 16 Pro gives you a bunch of options with a little D-pad to adjust the settings. I don't really use these that much because they're a bit finicky, but it allows you to do some color correction on the fly, which is nice. The iPhone 16 Pro also has spatial video, which is cool for the Apple Vision Pro, but most people don't have one of these, so this camera mode is kind of limited in terms of usefulness. Both phones get cinematic mode and slow motion, but on the 16 Pro, I think the cinematic mode has a couple more resolution and frame rate options that the 13 doesn't have, and the 16 Pro also has 4K slow motion at 120 FPS. It's cool, but I haven't really used it yet since it eats up storage like crazy. The 16 Pro also has action mode, which acts as a sort of camera stabilizer, as you can see here. And generally, the iPhone 13 is a solid camera, but the 16 Pro just brings it to another level and gives you a lot more flexibility as well. If you're looking for more professional features, the iPhone 16 has a lot to offer. You have the ability to shoot in RAW camera format or ProRes for video. Again, both of these eat up storage, but they're good for professionals who want as much data from the sensor as possible. The iPhone 16 Pro also has the ability to shoot in log video, which is a super flat color profile that makes color grading easier in post-processing. The iPhone 13 doesn't have this though. Lastly, you can always download third-party camera apps and even Apple's own Final Cut camera app for more options, and Apple's Final Cut camera app also allows you to shoot footage straight to an external SSD, which solves a lot of the storage issues one might have. The iPhone 16 Pro also has macro mode, which lets you take close-ups of objects. It actually uses the ultra-wide camera to do this, but I'm not a huge fan of it. The front camera on both phones is excellent, but I do like the iPhone 16 Pro's better. It makes everything look a bit more vibrant and bright, but it's a minor change. There's also the camera control button on the iPhone 16 Pro. I can't say this is a game changer, but it's become the definitive way for me to open the camera app. I rarely use it to actually adjust the camera settings though. I rarely use it to control the camera, because most of the controls on the camera control are also accessible on the iPhone screen already, and I find it more convenient to just use the on-screen control since the camera control is a bit finicky and a little hard to use at times. As for the microphones, both phones have solid microphones, but the iPhone 16 Pro has a feature called Audio Mix that can process the audio in your videos to do stuff like isolate your voice and make it sound like a studio. This is the iPhone 13's default microphone, and this is the iPhone 16's default microphone. So this is a test of the audio mix off, and this is a test of the audio mix on, and this is a test of the audio mix on, and this is a test of the audio mix on. Personally, I wouldn't use it. I'm not a huge fan of how it sounds, but it's there if you need it. Overall, the 13's camera is fine, but you're getting really big upgrades with the iPhone 16 Pro, like the telephoto, the 48 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, camera control, audio mix, photographic styles, and probably most importantly, ProRes, ProRAW, and log video recording capabilities, as well as the ability to shoot to an external hard drive. That said, if these don't sound like features that appeal to you, the 13's camera is good enough to keep for another year or two at least. To conclude, I think this is a pretty solid upgrade. Probably the most noticeable upgrades are camera, display, and performance, and Apple's really refined the iPhone Pro lineup of phones. That said, if you're fine with your 13 and it's still running well, then you can definitely hold off on upgrading for another 1 to 2 years. You know the saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there's no use spending a lot of money on a new phone you don't necessarily need. Another option is to wait for the iPhone 17 Pro, which might be a viable option depending on when you're watching this video, but you can't go wrong with getting the iPhone 16 Pro, unless you're watching this a month or two before September, and if that's the case, I'd recommend just waiting that month or two to see what the iPhone 17 Pro has to offer, because even if you don't want the 17 Pro, its release will make the 16 Pro cheaper. Me personally, the features I absolutely can't let go of on the 16 Pro are USB-C, 120Hz, and the awesome new camera features. Anyways, that's it for this video. If you want to learn how I did my action button menu thingy, then click this video right here and check out my affiliate links below if you want to buy either the iPhone 13 or the iPhone 16 Pro. Be awesome and stay techie. Bye! First video in this new house I'm renting. Both phones also have Apple Ceramic Shield. So the iPhone 13 still has 2 or 3 years of software support left. The only way I see USB-C being a downside is if you have a lot of lightning chargers and accessories and cables and whatnot. What was that?